Hey guys, how's it going? You've probably noticed, if you're into knives at all, you've noticed there's uh, several different catchphrases for different names of the types of grind. As far as you have a flat grind. Actually, you have a full flat grind, a high flat grind. You have a convex grind. You have a saber grind. You have a Scandi grind, which is also called a V grind or a 0 degree grind. So there's and there's more out there, but so there's, just by hearing the different names and stuff, you're like, wow, okay, well, this is what a saber grind's good for. This is what a Scandi grind's good for. It's not necessarily that simple. So what I'll do, generally, I'm trying to go over without rambling too much or adding to confusion, even though adding to your confusion would be a whole bunch of fun for me. I'm just going to kind of go over just the ins and outs of a grind and what you're looking for and what the limitations of grinds, I guess you would say. But generally, a grind is a grind. I mean, when it comes down to cutting, your cutting edge is the business end, and as far as the angle of that, that's what's going to be the main deciding factor of how it's going to perform under different circumstances. It's not what you're going to call that grind. That doesn't matter at all. What does matter is what that secondary bevel, or if it's a 0 grind, what your bevel is cut at. But generally, every knife is going to come down at an edge. So this part right here is on every knife, and this is actually what's going to decide the performance of your knife. And you can go anywhere depending on what you're wanting to do. You can go anywhere from probably like 15 to 35 degrees, anywhere in there. And each one, the down closer to 15 degrees, it's going to perform more like a razor blade, to where it's not going to have real good shoulder strength, because, like, say this is let's say this is a Scandi grind. Okay, so this is the shoulders. This is the top of the shoulders of your grind. When you have, say if this was a 17 or a 15, then this would be a 35. Now, and this is not to scale, obviously, but so this Scandi grind went from a 17 to a 35, and the cutting abilities are going to be totally different. They're both a Scandi grind, but we've changed the angle of the grind, of the actual 0 grind. So with this, you could beat on this all day. You can baton wood with it all day. This, as long as it's properly heat treated and tempered, this thing would probably never fail you. But it's not going to be worth a hoot when it comes to trying to do fine work. I don't know if you ever noticed, but like the original Condor bush lure, it had a stout grind like that. It actually had, I want to say, right offhand, I don't even remember what grind it was, but the actual bevel on the knife, I think it was a Scandi grind. It was supposed to be a Scandi or a convex. It was a convex, almost positive now. Anyway, but generally what it did is it come down to a whole bunch of meat on the blade, and then it came down into this little convex edge, and you could tell by using the knife, man, I could beat on it all day. But the only problem was, when you would go to shave wood, you had to tip that knife up so much to hit that edge that it's not efficient at creating shavings like that. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you have it stretched out like this, it's going to shave like a razor. I mean, you're going to be way laid down. You're going to be able to planes, so to speak, kind of plane the surface instead of being tipped up and kind of scraping the surface. So this one would definitely cut better as far as creating thin shavings. But because of the angle of the grind, the tip is a lot weaker, and it's not by improper heat treatment or anything like that, regardless of what people say. It's just the fact that you don't have this shoulder here to support the backside of that grind. So so close. So generally what you have a great cutting tool, but if you go beating on it and trying to baton with it, it's going to roll or it's going to chip, depending on, you know, if it's a high Rockwell hardness or a low Rockwell hardness. It's not going to perform like you wanted. You're going to get chip out, you're going to get edge roll, stuff like that, just because of the fact that this is a cutting machine, but it doesn't even want to try and be an axe or a machete. It's not designed for that. So generally these are two ideas of the same grind, but with different angles. So you can see just that alone makes a huge difference. But now you look and say, here's a Scandi grind on 3/16 inch thick steel, which is a pretty thick steel, and then here will be a Scandi grind on an 1/8 inch piece of steel. Now if you notice, this one is just going to inherently be more, this grind will be more accessible than this grind, for the simple fact that you have the taller shoulders because of the thicker steel. So even if you cut this at 17.5, yeah, you're going to stretch it out, you know, but you're still, because of this shoulder, you're not able to reap the benefits of that longer grind, so to speak. This is generalizations too. There are exceptions, but this is just kind of a generalization. But now this Scandi grind, you're able to, because of the thinner steel, your shoulder, the shoulder of the knife, is in tighter to where the business end of the blade. So with this one, you're actually going to still be able to create those thin shavings, but you're going to have a little more shoulder. So, you know, technically for a stretched out grind on this versus that, this 1/8 inch may perform better under batoning and stuff like that. But generally a Scandi grind, if you want the true benefits of a Scandi grind, you want it on 1/8 inch steel or less. You don't want it on 3/16 or 1/4 inch steel, for the simple fact that all you're doing is you're mimicking an axe, more or less. An axe is, you know, a big convex grind, short and flat and sturdy, but it's you know, it's not going to shave as well, so to speak. So my favorite grinds, and to me it goes to the angle. On an 1/8 inch blade, I do like the V grind or Scandi grind, but then I'll usually come in and just, like, here's your Scandi grind, but I'll usually come in, this edge will just be a little convex. I tip it up when I'm sharpening it so that it does have a little more strength right there. This would be what I do personally on an 1/8 inch steel. And then when I typically just use 1/8 inch and 3/16 inch. Well, on 3/16 inch, it would be like this, and then you're going to have what I call, it's a saber grind is what it is. But so you'll come down like this, you got your grind, because really all the grind's doing at this point is removing steel so that you can make a good grind, you know, so that you can make a more useful grind once the steel's thinner. So you come in and here's your saber grind, then you have another shoulder with that secondary bevel down there. So this on 3/16 is going to perform fairly close to this, but the thing is, with that second degree, or that secondary bevel down here, that's actually adding strength to it. So you will have a little more tip up on this knife to get the same performance from this knife. But this is more batoning friendly because you have a shoulder here and you have a shoulder here. So this grind, like I said, this is going to be more of an all-around good grind, but it's not going to perform on shaving tasks quite as well as here, and I will never claim that it will, because this knife, the knives that I make from 1/8 inch, I gear them more towards shaving, food prep, stuff like that. 3/16 inch, I'm trying to get them to do everything without breaking, but there's pros and cons, like you can see. A flat grind, a full flat grind, I don't, from my experience, I haven't seen a lot of advantages for typically what outdoor knives get used for. I haven't seen a lot of advantages for this extra shoulder to be cut out. For the simple fact that if you're batoning, once you hit this first shoulder, your wood's split. So even when you come to that secondary bevel, as you're splitting, it may hit it some, but it's already on its way out. So as far as a full flat grind, all you're really doing in essence is you're bringing the steel down thin enough to where you're creating almost like a Scandi grind, and you'll have the shoulder here, and then you'll have the spine of the knife back here, and these are your two areas that'll be strengthened. But I've gotten pretty happy with just the saber grind and with a secondary bevel. But it goes back to the angle. Again, I don't do, all my knives are generally about 22.5 to 25 degrees, right in there. And this is that angle that I'm worried about, is this cutting edge. And I make them between 22.5 and 25 degrees, right in there. It's hard to just dial each one in without a shop full of you know, equipment and stuff like that. But you know what that allows, you know, it assures me that each one, the utmost importance is a cutting tool. It's something you can pull out and you can cut with. Now, with the thicker steels and the saber grind, you know, I feel like my knives will hold up and to abuse. But at the same time, my first goal is to make them a solid cutting tool. So I go with the saber grind on the 3/16 inch. And I go with the Scandi or the V grind on 1/8 inch steel with a little bit of a convex. I usually do a little bit of a convex on that one, but people will say, well, can you do it in flat grind? And I'm like, you know, yeah, I can. But with my knives, when I put them out, I want to put my stamp of approval. It's kind of why, and I guess it comes down to that's why I don't take orders. Is because people, you know, I get asked like, well, can you do this one but in a V or in a flat grind? And I'm like, yeah, sure, but I don't have as much faith in that long flat grind as I would a saber grind, just because of that secondary shoulder there, the added strength that this thing will hold up under more conditions. I feel better. And it's just, I guess it's just simple geometry. So that's generally why the two grinds that I choose. But when you're looking at grinds and when you're trying to figure out what's going to work for what, this first bevel, keep in mind, regardless of what's behind it, that first bevel is what's going to be doing the cutting. So if you have a 35-degree grind, you know, you're going to baton all day and the thing will do great, but it's going to be on such an angle that it's not actually, you know, user friendly as far as making shavings and stuff like that. Can you do it? Yeah. I mean, I really haven't got a hold of a knife yet that, you know, can't hold its own, I guess you'd say. It does do what it's supposed to do, but there is a difference between, you know, 25 and the 35 as far as the performance of shaving, like for feather sticks and stuff like that, and food prep. But so when you go and you're looking and you're trying to decide what kind of grind, keep in mind you're cutting with this right here. Everything back here is, you know, the Scandi grind. You have no added strength until your grind ends, and then there's where your shoulder is. With the saber grind, but on 1/8 inch steel, I wouldn't want two bevels because you're already starting out with 1/8 inch. So if you come down here and do this, come up here and do another one, you know, you're having, you know, you're not benefiting from the secondary shoulder. It would make it stronger, but then it would also hinder the cutting ability of the actual edge itself. So this is kind of a primer, man. I don't really know. I hope I'm explaining it well enough. Because the bottom line is, you know, that secondary bevel or the primary bevel, the one that you're cutting with, that will decide more so how the knife's going to perform than anything else. I don't care what the name is, whether it's Scandi grind or, you know, saber grind with a micro bevel, which is like what I do, that I call a zero grind with a convex. The names don't really matter. What you're looking at, if you're wanting fine, you know, if you're looking for a fine cutting knife for fine tasks, you know, 17.5 to 20 degrees, even more, you know, even up higher than that to 25 or whatever. And I think pretty much any knife that's going to be used in the outdoors should be somewhere between 20 and 25 degrees. Once you get up above 25 degrees, it will excel at batoning. But that's just not what a knife's really made for. I mean, I want them to hold up to batoning, but I don't want to, I don't want somebody carrying around a tool that they're like, yeah, batons, but I need to carry this knife to cut things with. I don't know. It's a catch-22 because I want my knives tough, but I want them to work like they're supposed to. And there's a fine line, between that. But as far as grinds, focus on your primary bevel, and you may not be able to get the numbers, especially with custom makers and stuff, and I don't know exactly what mine are, and you may not be able to get the numbers, but it's just something to keep in mind, the differences between a saber grind, a flat grind. I've pretty much quit doing flat grinds because I didn't see the benefit, more or less, because I was losing so much steel. So I was starting with a piece of 3/16 inch steel, shaving it down just so I can put a secondary bevel on it, and I'm like, there's not a whole lot gained. You're creating a large wedge, so I guess it would do decent in batoning and stuff. But even with the saber grind, I mean, once it, like this is a V or a flat grind, and this would be a saber grind where you come down there, and this secondary shoulder is going to split your wood off. So the saber grind, in my opinion, for a heavy knife is probably the handiest grind to have. And then if you're on a thin steel like 1/8 inch or less, saber grind is a good grind also to have. Because if you figure you do a flat grind on 1/8 inch steel, you're not going to have much steel left by the time you actually have a bevel on it. This is my take on it, and generally different knife makers are different ways and different, everybody has different philosophies. This is just what I've come up with through my own testing, and I thought maybe it would kind of shed some light on some stuff for you guys. So, in conclusion, your main focus should be on the secondary bevel, and to be able to see that if you're wanting a precision cutting tool, you're not wanting any more angle before it starts to cut than necessary. But keep in mind that the less angle you have, the more prone that edge will be to rolling or chipping, and it's just geometry. I don't care what it's made of or how it's heat treated or tempered or anything like that. It's just geometry. If you have that edge just stuck out there with no shoulder up next to it and it's real thin steel, it's going to want to roll or chip depending on the hardness when it's put under brute force or pressure. Now I do edge quench all mine, so in essence what that's supposed to do is you come in and here's say this is a saber grind, so you got this, and that's your primary and your secondary, and then the knife comes back like this, and I'll edge quench, and so generally you'll see a lot of times you'll see a quench line in my blades like that, and generally what that's doing is this is hard, this will typically be a spring steel, and then this is soft annealed steel. And what that's going to allow is when you do hit it, it's going to have a little bit of give there and a lot of give there. Or I say a lot of give. This is, it's steel. You can beat on it and stuff. But that's just kind of my theory. That's why I edge quench everything. And I even do it on smaller knives. I have more control over the actual heat treat and temper. And I like the fact that it's creating a spring type steel in the middle. It just makes for a durable blade. So, but anyway, I hope that kind of cleared some stuff up, or like I said, if it added to the confusion, that's just as good for me. But anyway, guys, if you like the video, like to see more, like, comment, subscribe, and I sure appreciate you guys for taking a look. Thanks, folks.